So this is just the same data set. What we're going to do is drill into one of these lower level components, so in particular the handlebars. So as before, just jump into the structure. We'll see that visualization and we'll see our eBOM over on the left-hand side here. So what I'm going to do is create a new part. So like Alan mentioned previously, this eBOM might not be reflective of what your CAD structure is. So we might want to modify it. So in this case, I might purchase some sort of component and I want to add that to my BOM. So I have a bunch of different attributes that I can use to, I guess, assign to this part. In this case, I'm going to say I bought it. We also have the ability to add trace codes, so by lot, serial number, and so forth. And then there's other things like gathering parts and phantom parts. So you can go ahead and you can configure this part. So creating that adds it to the structure. I'll make sure to check it in, save those changes. And then I can go ahead and create my manufacturing BOM. So to do so, we're going to open it up in the BOM transformer. So there's an additional window that'll open up. And what we can see is in the upstream, we have our design and working. So this is our design view, and downstream is where our manufacturing view will be. So to do so, we create a new manufacturing view. So depending on how Windchill is configured and your permissions, or the user itself will have the ability of design, manufacturing, and service. So service and manufacturing BOMs are what we're intending to create from this upstream information. We can also add some tags to it, whether or not it's costing, production, and so forth, and then some additional identifiers. So for the sake of this, I'm going to accept these settings and go forward. So what I want to do now is I'm going to copy this top level part, and then I'm going to paste it downstream, and I'm convert it into a manufacturing part. So we can see now that this is our manufacturing view of this component. What it hasn't done, it hasn't taken across our children. So we're going to just go ahead, copy those over. But what we want to do is maintain this design view. Because we're not modifying this in any way, we're only modifying, say, the top level, which will be some sort of assembly procedure. We're just going to paste them in as the design view and carry them over. So we can see they're all in a design view, just like the upstream component, apart from the top level. So what I'm going to do now is copy the remaining parts apart from these two assemblies here. So before I do that, I'll toggle on the visualization for both upstream and downstream. And here we can see that depending on what we have in our upstream and downstream BOMs is what will be displayed in this visualization. Highlighting certain components will also highlight that in that view. So we can see now once I paste these components in, it's going to go ahead, create those links, and it's also going to update our visualization. So in a scenario like this, we may want to, we can easily see which components are not included downstream. So you might have a scenario where you have a much more complex bill of materials. So we can use the reconciliation assistance and we can go ahead and find these discrepancies. So I'm going to go ahead, select the top level parts. I'm going to go do a search. What I can do is I can highlight those. So I can highlight the two, in this case, two components. It might be many that we haven't included in our downstream BOM. We can also use some additional visualization tools. So we can look at it, we can inspect it to determine whether or not we actually want to include this information. And then we can do like we did previously and just go ahead, copy and add it downstream. So for the sake of this, I'm going to leave it as is and just check in this information. We'll go ahead and look at some of the compare tools. check in. We can also filter this information. So if you have a relatively large bill of materials, you're going to assign a path filter. So this is just going to limit the amount of information that's displayed. So currently I'm only looking at this assembly. And then we can go ahead and look at the corresponding part in the upstream component. So to disable that, you can simply disable it. It's going to repopulate or update the visualization, and then off we go. So now that I've checked that in, I'm just going to close this down, and I'm going to go ahead and compare that structure. So like I did with the snowmobile, I'll compare the structure, but in this case, I'm going to compare the design to that recently created manufacturing view. So the idea behind this is that all these different views and information you'll have access to, so all the different iterations and revisions will be displayed here. So I'll go ahead and select that. And like before, we can easily see the differences between both the upstream and downstream BOMs. We have those indication icons to show the differences. We also have the differences outlined. So this is a better example where we're seeing the attributes have been highlighted as changed. So we have a design and a manufacturing version. Going down into it, we can see that this line in particular does not have an equivalent downstream component. So just another way of highlighting the power of the Windchill interface, as opposed to say using Excel to manually look at both your upstream and downstream BOMs. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just jump back to the snowmobile model. And we'll look at how this is displayed in the BOM transformer. So this is a more complex manufacturing bill of materials, but same process, and it's going to give you the same sort of information like that lower level BOM. So just waiting for this to load. So now in this scenario, I have those existing chassis. So we saw those in the different variants. So selecting it, it's going to highlight it in our visualization. We can also right click it and then show the equivalent downstream component. In this case, they've used the manufacturing view to designate two different color variants. So we have the black and red. Same can be said for the Axis chassis. So it's another way of using this to take a single component, which is your design component, and then changing it into the manufacturing view where they have multiple variations of it. And like Alan mentioned previously, we have our process plan, so we can go ahead and we can link back to this digital thread and make sure that the manufacturing floor has the available information. So having a look at that, we can look at the structure. And this is corresponding to all the different components that we want to address. And then from that, we can generate our work instructions. So specific to this snowmobile, we have all the relevant information right down to the shop floor. So we have quantities, we can display certain processes that we want to happen first, where it's assembly procedures, and give that information to the people that need it. Okay, so that's the end of this portion of the demo. I'll hand it back to Alan to continue the presentation.